Hello and welcome back. We're excited to have you here with us at the 2021 Purpose Power Summit. I'm Chip Walker, Head of Strategy at StrawberryFrog. There's going to be a ton of fantastic back-to-back content coming up all afternoon. But up next specifically, I'm super excited to be having a conversation with Stephen Hahn-Griffiths, who's Executive Vice President with the well-known research firm called RepTrak. Together, Stephen and I are going to be sharing out the results of the 2021 Purpose Power Index over the next 20 minutes or so. So Stephen, welcome, and thanks so much for being here.
Hey Chip, always great to partner with you and the team at StrawberryFrog as ever. What I'm going to walk through is some of the key learnings from a most recent study and fundamentally how the pandemic changed brand purpose as we know it. What's amazing about our work together, I believe, is it's the first empirically proven model on measuring corporate brand purpose and brand purpose more specifically. It's really a sort of parallel to the initial study we fielded in 2019. Of course, more recently, post the pandemic, there are real implications for some of the things we've learned. And we talked to a lot of people. We talked to over 6,500 individual respondents, which provides a nationally representative sample of the US population. We captured nearly 21,000 individual ratings across 200 individual brand entities, and the timing of the study, just as a point of reference, was January 2021. So this is literally fresh out the field. But let's just quickly ground ourselves on what we captured. We captured what we're calling the Purpose Power Index and the four components to measuring this algorithm. First off, your perceptions of the company based on its ability to deliver beyond profits. In other words, does the organization stand for more than just making money? Are you committed to improving lives and serving the communities in which you exist? Do you sort of deliver on the fulfillment of the embedment of society, not just benefiting those stakeholders close in, such as employees, customers, or shareholders, but society as a whole? And then finally, the fourth pillar fundamentally, are you committed to making the world a better place to live? Beyond humanity, are you committed to the biodiversity of the world at large? So these are the core things we capture as measuring corporate brand purpose and brand purpose more specifically. And what an amazing contrast from where we were in 2019 to 2021. Of course, we've all been through the trials and tribulations of the pandemic, but equally, it's had significant implications for the way that brands are viewed in terms of purpose. First off, I'd like to report that even in the eye of the crisis, purpose matters. Indeed, it's probably fair to say that since the end of COVID, hopefully, as we see it today, reputation and purpose have become more inextricably linked. So the R squared, in other words, its statistical significance has only increased from 0.75 to where it was in 2019 to a 0.88. In other words, the integrity of purpose matters more than ever before, and it has a bigger impact on the overall reputation of your organization. What's fascinating amongst all the different brand entities we measured, and just as a point of reference, I said there was over 200 entities. Of those that made the top 100, nearly 1/3 of those brands are new. So there's real moving and shaking going on within the context of how brands are viewed. And importantly, amongst those in the top 20, over 50% are new. So we're seeing a lot of companies rise and fall through the lens of corporate brand purpose. Here's a recap of what we presented to the world in 2019. There were brands that dominated, fundamentally those strongly associated with the premise of being socially good. Companies like Seventh Generation, Tom's, Method, REI, Wegmans, to name a few. Well, those that kind of rose to the top and really kind of represented companies who were purposeful through the lens of being socially good. Fast forward to most recent study findings in 2021, what we see is a new crop of new, more diverse types of purposeful leaders emerge. Those companies who are not just socially good, but essentially good in many different ways. New entrants including the likes of Spacex, GSK, AbbVie, Kimberly-Clark, 3M, Tesla, to name a few. All companies who've emerged and risen through the lens of being purposeful, but aren't necessarily companies born out of purpose. These are many companies who have sort of evolved more purposefully and found a new way to be relevant as society's changed around them. Also important to mention, there are those companies that may not rank at the top of the hierarchy, but are certainly work in progress as what we consider being breakaway brands. In other words, they differentiate as being purposeful and standing out in the category in which they play. So Whole Foods relative to the overarching retail, Danone relative to other consumer packaged goods and food and beverage brands, Microsoft in the lens of technology, UPS, Chick-Fil-A, Truist, LinkedIn, all companies of growing emergence in terms of purpose that we would certainly have on our watch list as being breakaway brands that are really fulfilling the broader agenda of purpose and really starting to stand out in the category in which they play. But with more context and more detail, let me hand you back to Chip to take you through some of the real underlying stories to reveal those purposeful companies and maybe how and why they got there.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, let's go in now and go into a little bit more depth about the top 20 winners for 2021. I just want to highlight some of them, and what I want to point out is really the diversity that Stephen mentioned. It's a much more diverse list of companies than we had in 2019. To start out with, we had a couple of real, to me, surprises that popped up on the list that were really not necessarily social good companies necessarily in a lot of people's perception, but actually were bold innovators. And specifically, I'm talking about Elon Musk's two companies, Spacex and Tesla. Spacex was not, we didn't even have it on our list in 2019. It barely was there. 2021, it was the number 3 brand. Tesla went from number 22 to number 9 in terms of its purpose perception. So I think everyone probably knows a lot about both SpaceX and Tesla, and the fact that Elon Musk seems to be on a mission to put us into outer space and to make sustainability more common. So bold innovators were on the list in a way they weren't before. Here is another big surprise, is that we had some brands, in fact, some entire industries that went from sort of zero to hero over the course of 2019 going into 2021. Big pharma in particular, a category not only not necessarily viewed as purposeful, but I think who some people would have kind of viewed as a villain, almost anti-purposeful in the past, went from almost at the bottom of all the industries we looked at to being the number 1 industry. And I guess we can all imagine why. If we look at a couple of the brands from Big Pharma, GSK, GlaxoSmithKline performed fantastic. They went from being number 160 out of 200 in 2019 to number 4 overall in 2021. And of course, they were in the news all year. They actually didn't end up coming out with a vaccine. It was delayed, but they were in the news talking about it probably more than any other brand, even Pfizer. We see Pfizer over on the right-hand side. They were probably the most improved brand in the study. They were starting at a lower number 188 in 2019, but they came all the way up and cracked the top 50 at number 49 in 2021. So we all know they kind of performed a miracle in pulling off a vaccine in record time. We also saw some kind of practical brands that while maybe relied on in our households, I don't know if anybody saw as too purposeful. Just as there were sort of essential workers who came to the fore during the pandemics, we have some sort of essential brands here. Clorox being a biggie, another company that I think in the past maybe was associated with chemicals and had sometimes had some negatives associated with it, was seen in a really different light. They're all the way up at number 11 on the Purpose Power Index. As we know, they went way out of their way to provide products, to donate in a way that's was really needed during the pandemic. 3M really was heroic in their efforts to make masks throughout the pandemic. Kimberly-Clark, as we all know, there was a huge rush on one of their top products, toilet paper, but other essential household products as well. Again, moving well up the list at number 6 from number 20 2 years before. I think another thing that's interesting to point out is the size of the companies at the top of our list. In 2019, of the top 10 companies on our list, only one of them was a gigantic corporation. And by gigantic, we're saying, say, 10 billion plus in revenue. And that was USAA in 2019. In 2021, of our top 10 companies, 8 out of 10 are gigantic companies, 10 billion plus in revenue. And I think that just goes to bust the myth that it's really kind of only smaller, purpose-born startup types that can be seen as purposeful. Giants actually can do so and do so more than others. To just sort of dimensionalize this point a little bit more, that Purpose has broadened way beyond social good. Higher purpose obviously involves social good, but we created a perceptual map. This is based on real data from the study where we had respondents rate all the brands on a bunch of different attributes. Things like selling products that make everyday life better, things like not being afraid to be bold or controversial, acting innovatively to create new solutions to advance mankind. So there are about 20 or 21 of these that they rated all the brands on. And then we statistically mapped them out in 2D space, and this is basically what you see. And the reason we were showing you this is that you see socially conscious is one of the axes over on the right, and there are a bunch of brands that kind of are over on that side. But there are other axes too. At the opposite end, there's innovation, and then at the top, you have practical versus bold. So you can see that there's almost sort of 4 quadrants, sort of practical and socially conscious brands like Lego and Etsy. Down on the bottom, you have socially conscious brands that are more bold, like Patagonia, which we'll look at in a few minutes, or Ben & Jerry's. These are brands that tend to be a bit more in your face about their social activism. But over on the left-hand side, innovative companies, some that are bold, like Tesla and Spacex, but up on top, you see some that are innovative in a more practical way, like the essential brands we just looked at, like 3M, Clorox, etc. All of this is to say is that a change that we saw is that there's not one way to be a higher purpose brand. There are multiple ways, and some that are surprising, like innovation. So with that, let's turn and look a little bit differently. How do you become one of these brands that's recognized as having a higher purpose? What are the paths to get there? And I think what we did was we uncovered that there are 5 important ones. So again, let me explain what we did. I won't go into a ton of detail, but as I mentioned, we had folks rate all the brands on over 20 purpose-related attributes. Things about the products they make, how innovative they are, how they treat their employees, philanthropy, participation in societal movements, etc. We then did statistical analysis, which told us 2 things. One, it broke them down into 5 underlying drivers of purpose perception, and it also told us how important these 5 drivers are in order. So that's what I want to share with you now. We're calling these the 5 Ps of purpose activation, and you see going left to right that you go from important to even more important over on the right. Everything on here is important, but as you go right, things are more important. So the first one is about really products and services. So it may be surprising to folks that the most important thing, if you want to be purposeful, is to make sure that you do things like having products and services that make everyday life better and positively contribute to society. Hugely important to purpose perception. Planet, making products and services sustainably and environmentally responsible operations. Progress is an interesting one that I don't know if I would have expected to pop, but basically it's about actively innovating solutions that advance mankind. As we saw earlier, brands like SpaceX and Tesla really go off the chart on that one. People, how are you treating folks as a company or a corporation? Your employees, folks in your community, what kind of philanthropy are you doing? And then the last one we're calling positive change. And it's really kind of 2 things. One is about sort of social justice, like support for things like equality, as well as social activism, participating or supporting social movements and having a CEO who speaks out on important issues. So it's sort of a social activism there. It's important, but interestingly, it is not the most important thing. So let's look a little bit at some companies who did well on each of these. Let's start with our number 5 driver, the one that I just got through talking about, positive change. It's really kind of social activism. A company that was off the charts on this one is Patagonia. And you all may be familiar with their campaign that was called Vote the Assholes Out. Patagonia's purpose is, and this is a direct quote, "We're in the business to save our home planet." But the way that they do it is very in your face. This was a campaign to try to vote out folks, politicians who were climate deniers, and they put it in the tag of some of their men's clothing during 2020. So off the charts on that positive change driver. Another driver is people. that I talked about before. How are you treating folks, your consumers, your customers, your employees, your communities? Chick-fil-A was a real standout on this one. We're calling this sort of a warm meal with a side of humanity. You see a quote on the right-hand side here by Chuck Bullard, who is a VP at Chick-fil-A. If you want to change the world, start with the person 3 feet away. And if you've ever been to a Chick-fil-A, you know that they take hospitality and the way they treat folks seriously. And it was recognized in the scores on the Purpose Power Index this year. The progress driver, I mentioned this earlier, but it was hard not to want to look at SpaceX sort of changing the world. SpaceX's stated purpose is making humanity multiplanetary. And gosh, it looks like they're doing it. During a year of sort of stagnation, SpaceX reminded us that our core, America, is about progress. They actually even named one of their spacecrafts Resilience. So a lot in the news this year, and people took notice. Second to last driver, Planet. I guess this one's not surprising, but Lego was a brand that seems to have going from plastic to anything but. Their purpose is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. But I think it's important to point out that Lego has made pledges that all their packaging is going to be made renewable by 2025. And in fact, all of their core products are going to be from sustainable materials by 2030. So a huge commitment to Planet on the part of Lego. And again, people are taking notice. The last one, and our most important driver, product. Changing the world one product at a time. And this was a surprise because it's Unilever, which is kind of an umbrella corporation for brands that a lot of people know, like Dove and some other brands. And often the parent companies aren't known as well. But Unilever's long-term commitment to environment and sustainability got it noticed for the kinds of products it's making and things it's doing to make its products more sustainable. So you can see here on the right-hand side from Fast Company, one of their global brands, Omo. Now you can wash your clothes with recycled carbon emissions. So Unilever not only making a difference, but getting credit for it. So just a couple of other things before maybe we have a little bit more conversation about the study in general and purpose, but what do you do to actually be seen as a purpose leader? How do you use those different drivers that we just gotten through talk about and avoid being seen as a purpose washer? So there's actually 4 things that we've seen in working with companies and with this data over the past year. Claiming to be a purpose-driven company, but ignoring these principles can have you end up being seen, I think, as disingenuous, as not being straightforward about it, as having ulterior motives, and being what we call a quote-unquote purpose washer. The first one is clarity. This may seem obvious, but it's something that I think a lot of companies end up forgetting. If people don't understand what your company's purpose is, or at least have a general understanding of it, you're sort of nowhere. A huge difference in the top 20 brands and all the other brands was that people said in our survey, I understand what this company's purpose is all about. So that's a biggie. 2, and again, you may think this is obvious, but apparently it's not, because it's action. And of our top brands, what people told us repeatedly was that they saw the brands do things. They saw them do communications. They saw them do actions that were bold, that they got the sense that they were unafraid to take a stand. So having a clear purpose but not acting on it is a problem. Action is a key to getting it right. The third is that of the stands people are taking, the companies that were at the top of our list, the stand they're taking tends to come across as being more of a societal stand, not just a stand about, say, making a better product, or a stand about doing better than other folks in the category. These were actually stands that brands are taking on societal issues, whether it be the environment, whether it be getting our society into space again, a societal stand as opposed to something that's just more about everyday life. And the last one I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. We call it story. And what that's all about is really the 5 drivers that we just got through looking at. I think there's sometimes a tendency for a company to want to hit on one of them and just do that. let's say it's sort of more about positive change and social activism. So align with a cause and or a movement in society that's out there, post about it on social media, and that's it. There's a problem with that. And what the problem is that purpose isn't just a why statement or a single action to consumers in their mind. Purpose is a story in their minds. It's a narrative in their minds about how your entire company operates, how it acts, how it lives in the world, and everything you do matters. So if you're doing social posts about let's say an equality issue, but consumers know that your company hasn't paid income tax in the past 10 years, that you don't have a very diverse board of directors, that you have a terrible environmental record. They notice this, and they fail to give you credit as a purpose-driven company because they see holes in your story. You come across as disingenuous. Let me give you an example, and this is actually our top brand, 7th generation, of a brand that's hitting on all 5 of the P's like gangbusters. Product, you see, and I think we all know 7th generation's products are sort of the gold standard in sustainability. A lot that they do in terms of planet, smaller, 100% biodegradable packaging. They do a ton of innovation to do things like tackle stains. They are known as a great place to work and for how they treat people in their communities. I'm looking forward to interviewing the CMO of 7th Generation about all the things that they're planning to do differently in 2021 to be seen as more purposeful. So with that, that's sort of the story that we have for you. So I sort of took a step back and talked with Stephen about it too, to sort of think, so what are some of the important things we learned about purpose in 2021? There are a ton of them, as you just sort of heard, but there were 4 that struck me particularly. One, we talked about that there's just a broader purpose landscape today. There are more ways that people are giving brands credit for being purposeful. It's not just limited to a few smaller social good brands. Really, it's open to any brand, depending on how they handle it. Products proved to be massively important in a way that I think maybe nobody expected. And obviously, the pandemic had a lot to do with that, helping brands like Clorox be seen as a lot more purposeful than they were before. But innovation gave us hope. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but SpaceX and Tesla are great examples of that. But I think the thing that to keep in mind as we move forward is that purpose perception apparently can shift super quickly. If you've ever been to brand tracking presentations where you're getting year to year or month to month tracking results on how your brand is doing in the marketplace, one of the things that you probably know is that those metrics, like things like relevance and esteem, even awareness, they don't change usually very fast at all. They change very slowly year to year. And I think what we saw with this study is that purpose apparently is really culturally sensitive. And so where you are this year could be very, very different from where you are next year, depending on what you've been doing and what's been happening out there in culture, which again, I think just underscores the importance of doing this purpose power research every year. So that's our presentation for today. I'm wondering, Stephen, I was just talking about my observations of some of the things that I found to be either most interesting or surprising or noteworthy coming out of the study. I don't know, did you agree with those? Did you have some other ones that struck you?
I did, Chip, and really fascinating subject. I feel like we could talk about this all day, but really, to your point about how purpose shifts quickly, I think it's fair to say that coming out of COVID, one of the things we've done as a society is we put companies on a higher moral pedestal. We've made it sort of loftier and we've created higher expectations for what we expect a brand to deliver. But what I thought was fascinating as a point of contrast to that is how the dependence and importance of products as a sort of grounding mechanism for purpose has become critically important. You can't lose yourself in the esoterics of higher purpose. It can't just be a statement that resides on the wall of the boardroom or in an annual report. You've really got to find a way to identify with the movement and find a way to activate it in a very tangible, genuine, authentic way. So as much as the North Star and the endeavor of how you want to fulfill purpose may not change radically, how you activate purpose and how you meet those changing expectations and the tectonic shifts that happen in society unto itself makes your management of a purpose almost a 365-day-a-year full contact sport in how do you continue to maintain the degree of purpose, how you activate it in a compelling way, how do you maintain that authenticity in meeting expectations. Not an easy endeavor, but truly, as we pointed out, there are great brands who know how to do it, so it's certainly possible in that realm.
Fantastic. Could not agree more, Stephen. So thank you. And if any of you out there would like a copy of today's presentation, you can download it on the event website, which is www.purposepowerindex.com. That's purposepowerindex.com. And with that, Stephen, I'd like to thank you so much for being here. As always, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chip. I enjoyed our conversation and all the very best to you.